Good day, everyone, and Sir Dave. After the discussion about the medieval period, our group will present to you the tourism and hospitality in Renaissance and Elizabeth era. I'm Pangajan Axel C, together with my group mates Miss Salamero and Miss Subasola. Table of contents. The Renaissance era existed in 14th to 17th century, while the Elizabeth era existed in 1558 to 1603. The next slide will be presented by Miss Subasola.
Thank you, Mr. Pangan. First, let us have short background. What is Renaissance era? This era began in 14th century through the countries such as Italy, Germany, England, and France that shared same some of their culture. This era is the transition from the Middle Age into modernity. That's why Renaissance word came from the French word means rebirth. Next, the tourism in this era will be discussed by Miss Salamero.
Thank you, Ms. Wasola. Tourism in Renaissance era. Long distance travel was frequently dangerous in the past. So, how did they travel? Typically, people choose the most basic mode of transportation through walking. Rich people could travel on horses, but keeping them was expensive because they required a lot of food and care. In addition to walking, marine travel also grew during the early modern era. The majority of travelers were merchants, and many of them traveled along the well known Silk Road, which linked the Europe and Asia. Silk Road also functioned as a channel for the transmission of cultural arts like dance, music, and theater, also the spices, silk, and architecture. However, there is a problem arising. The Ottoman Empire at the time largely controlled the local traffic, and because of this, Europeans had to travel a different route along the sea. This is when major ports were able to grow, the maritime industry flourished, and important geographical discoveries were made possible, just like how the Spaniards conquest the Philippines. The cost of the marine trip was lower that time. That's why it became famous and be able to grow. Next po. As we can see here, the red line indicates the route by walking, and for the blue line indicates the route for sea travel. When the Europeans invented the cruise ship for them to travel, they can go farther because of the marine travel. And they are now able to travel on different countries by purpose of business and religious activities. For the Elizabethan era, let's proceed with Miss Suwasola.
Very informative, Miss Salamero. Next, we have the Elizabethan era. The Elizabethan period is seen as an instance of the English Renaissance, one that promoted national pride via the pursuit of classical ideals, imperial and expansion in naval triumph. The English Renaissance at this time saw a flourishing of poetry, music, and literature. The tourism in this era will be broadly discussed by Mr. Pangan.
Thank you, Miss Subasola. Queen Elizabeth I. Queen Elizabeth I is the Queen of England and Ireland. She became Queen in England and Queen of Ireland on November 17, 1558, and was crowned on Queen of England on January 15, 1559. Daughter of Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn, Elizabeth was the only daughter of Henry VIII and his second wife, Anne Boleyn, after the execution of her mother, on charges of adultery and treason. When Elizabeth was only two, the little princess found her royal status threatened. She became queen after the death of her half-sister Mary, born in September 7, 1533, last monarch in the House of Tudor. The House of Tudor was a royal house of largely Welsh origin. that held the English throne from 1485 to 1603. Queen Elizabeth I. The Elizabethan era lasted from 1550 to 1600. Elizabeth I, who ascended to the throne in 1558 and reigned until 1603, was the great monarch during this time period, which is why it is known as the Elizabethan period, which is named after her. Elizabethan era. People believed that the queen was God's representation here on earth, had high regard for family in a community, deep respect for the hierarchy. Hierarchy means a system or organization in which people or group are ranked one above the other according to status or authority. Just like the picture besides, that's the representation of the meaning of hierarchy. Golden age in English history. The 16th century saw a rise in the popularity of educational travel, where a gentleman's education should be completed by a 3-year grand tour of the continent's cultural hubs. Grand tour, which was created by the British, its travel for educational purposes. Young men from privileged families would go to the grand tour. England, France, Germany, Austria, Switzerland, and Italy. Additional info for Grand Tour. In the 18th century, the so-called Grand Tour became a rite of passage for aristocrat young men. The journey typically involved 3 to 4 years of travel around Europe and included an extensive sojourn, which means temporary stay in these kinds of places. The Grand Tour. England. Tribuna of the Uffizi. Johannes Sophanis Tribuna of the Uffizi, 1772 to 1777. The painting is considered by many to be the most encyclopedic record of the Grand Tour ever completed. France, the Roman Arena in Arles. The Arles Amphitheater is a Roman amphitheater in the southern French town of Arles. Two-tiered, it is probably the most prominent tourist attraction in the city, which thrived in ancient Rome. Germany, Cologne Cathedral. It is the seat of the Archbishop of Cologne and of the administration of the Archdiocese of Cologne. It is a renowned monument of German Catholicism. Austria, St. Anne's Column. St. Anne's Column stands in the city center of Innsbruck of Maria Therese's trade. It was given its name when, in 1703, the last Bavarian troops were driven from the Tyrol on St. Anne's Day as part of the war on the Spanish succession. Switzerland, Kappelbruck. In the city of Lucerne, in central Switzerland, there is a covered wooden footbridge called the Kappelbruck that spans the river Rues diagonally. The bridge, which takes its name from the nearby St. Peter's Chapel, is special because it has several interior paintings from the 17th century, though many of them were destroyed in 1993, far along with a larger portion of the centuries old bridge. Italy, Colosseum, east of the Roman Forum in the heart of Rome. Italy is it is an east of the Roman Forum in the heart of Rome. Italy is in an oval amphitheater known as the Colosseum. Despite its age, it is the largest standing amphitheater in the world and the largest Asian amphitheater ever constructed. A status symbol that emerged and spread across Europe. Depending on the length, a grand tour could extend for months or even years. For cultural and educational objectives like language and arts, each student was assigned a personal tutor and classes were frequently taken with the assistance of the cicerone. Cicerone is a skilled teacher or guide, priest, educators, writers, and historians. Upon their return from the grand tour, they are expected to be well-mannered and highly fashionable, fluent with at least 3 languages, familiar with antiquities, knowledgeable in arts, culture, and painting. Traveling to spas became fashionable among members of the high society, not only for the creative aspects but also social events, games, dancing, and gambling. Spas, from the word spa, meaning fountain. The next slide will be presented by Miss Salamero.
Thank you, Mr. Pangan. Since we are done in tourism, let's don't forget the hospitality. The hospitality in Renaissance era is started by Christopher Columbus. When Christopher Columbus, an Italian explorer, made his second trip to the Caribbean in 1493, he discovered pineapples. When a colonial sea captain returned from a journey, he would post a pineapple sign at his door to let his friends know that he was home and ready to receive visitors. The pineapple has a long and romantic history as a sign of friendliness, welcome, and hospitality. Today, the pineapple is a global representation of hospitality. The hospitality in Renaissance era most likely starts in houses where the family welcome their guests and make them feel at home. That's why it is understandable why the house of rich people is big because they have a lot of room for their guests. The beginning of restaurant. Restaurant comes from Latin word restorare, means to restore. Now, what is taverns? Travelers had access to the taverns by the highway since the Middle Age to rest or spend the night. Although they were protected from thieves and bad weather, the accommodations were frequently insufficient. A tavern is a place of business where people congregate to consume alcoholic beverage, receive food service, and find lodging. The 16th century was a time when inns and taverns can see a significant growth in demand. Around this time, the first hotel style hospitality establishment was constructed. And one of the hotels arise in Renaissance era is the Hotel Cour du Corbeau in Strasbourg, and it has been existed since the beginning of the 16th century and one of the older hotels in Europe. It also among the most exquisite Renaissance architectural combinations, and the city-owned hotel offers 63 elegant rooms to its visitors to ensure first-rate comfort and a memorable stay. For the hospitality in Elizabethan area will be discussed by Ms. Suwasola.
Hospitality in Elizabethan Era. Next slide. The French word hospice has been adapted to form the word hospitality that means taking care of the travelers. Next. And during the 16th century, the demand for inns and taverns went up. The first hospitality establishment was built in 1788 and named Hotel de Henry. These hotels created a trend in England and New York made taverns. Next slide. And here are some hotel inns during Elizabethan's era. Maid's Head Hotel, yet another hotel vying for the title of England oldest, is this sprawling venue in central Norwich. The claim is based on the site, which is where the place of Norwich first bishop, Herbert de Losinga, was located in the 1090s. The oldest part of the existing structure dates back to the 15th century, when the venue was first used as an inn. Since then, several famous historical figures has graced the Maid's Head, including Catherine of Aragon. In 1520, and Queen Elizabeth I, who visited Norwich in 1587. Both have suites named after them that are filled with period features like a 16th century headboard in the Elizabeth suite, perfect for feeling like royalty during your stay. Next is the porch house. The porch house set in the pictures Cotswold's town of Stow on the Wold claims to be England's oldest hotel, apparently in existence since 947 AD. Carbon dating has indeed shown that some of the wooden beams within the pub are around 1,000 years old. As such, it has been crowned England's oldest inn by the Guinness Book of Records. Before it became an inn, part of the building was used as a hospice. Built by a Saxon Duke, Aethelmar, another notable feature is the series of witch marks that were found carved in the pub's 16th century fireplace to keep out evil spirits. And that's it.
Thank you for listening. This is our report. Again, I'm Pangan Jan Axel.
I'm Catherine El Salamero.
I'm Griselda and Swasala.
That's all. Thank you and God bless. Have a great day.